All right, guys, before I get in this episode, I wanted to mention that I just put 12 open spots for my elk hunting in-person seminar on the website at pursuitwithcliff.com/elk course, one word. I promise you this is the best use of your time if your primary goal is becoming a better elk hunter. What I have done over the last 2 or 3 years is developed a scenario repetition-based system that takes you through the process over and over. So we're talking finding elk on public land, setting up stocks and executing stocks, building shooting positions, doing archery setups. In a small group environment with just 4 or 5 students, we do these repetitions over and over. We're able to debrief them, tell you what you're doing right, tell you what you're doing wrong, and you're going to learn a ton quickly. This is the equivalent of 5 or 6 very robust elk hunting seasons, all jammed in to 4 days. So go check it out, pursuitwithcliff.com/elk course. Now, let's get into this episode.
I had a lot of people jump on me saying that I was advocating 700 and 1,000-yard shots, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
In the rifle context with Coues deer for all species, there is going to be a distance where it's a lot harder to do things. Move your rest, can't make any noise.
I've been taught the concept so many times because of the mistakes that I've made. Every animal has a bubble, especially with Coues deer.
All right, so I'm here in person with Jay Scott and Poppy. And Jay and I have done a bunch of podcasts over the years.
We have.
Kind of I would say my start in terms of, social media exposure was on your podcast, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I know always having you on as a guest was a good episode. We could go in a lot of different directions, and that's when you were running your outfitting business in Colorado. And so it's cool to have you on to have kind of a unique perspective on, talking to a lot of hunters and then trying to be able to manage hunters and then, having a lot of in the field experience too. So it was always great having you on as a guest for sure.
I always enjoyed it, man. And it's got to be like 5 or 6 podcasts we've done together, but I don't think we've ever done one in person.
No, I'm excited for this. And actually you, for a season there, kind of took over and did quite a few podcasts
that's right.
on my platform. And people really liked that. And now to see how well you've flourished and how successful your YouTube channel and your following, it's just awesome to see.
No, dude, I appreciate all the guidance and help along the way and exposure. But it's good to have you on, man. I know you're about to get back into Mexico hunting, right?
Yeah. First of all, I've got to say I've got the logo dog here, Poppy Scott. She's napping here on my lap. She usually hangs pretty tight with me. We're kind of buds, but we're going to kick off our Mexico season here. We're at the end of December, and we're going to kick it off in early January. We have 2 sheep tags down there on the ranch, and we just conducted those in December and got 2 real nice rams. We had 2 guys from Michigan. In their late 60s, early 70s, really nice guys that were friends, and they wanted to come down and hunt bighorns together. And so we went down there, Phil and I went down to the ranch and got a couple real nice desert bighorn. And we'll kick off our mule deer hunts here in a couple weeks, and then we'll be hot and heavy in the Coues deer season, kind of mid-January till the end. We really like to run our hunts there in the peak of the rut. We feel like it gives the guys the best opportunity at those deer when they're rutting around, and it kind of brings them out. They're a real nocturnal deer. So, letting the guys hunt Coues deer in the rut with a rifle is the best way to kind of get that path of success kind of graded for them.
The season in Mexico for them, is it long?
Yeah, so it's one of the beautiful things about Mexico is actually the season for deer. It's pretty universal. It runs from basically Thanksgiving to Valentine's Day. And every year it'll bounce back, a couple days here and there. But for the most part, it's Thanksgiving to Valentine's Day. In Sonora, you have those mule deer, and the Sonoran mule deer, they rut pretty much from just right about now, from between Christmas and New Year's till about the 20th of January.
Okay.
And then the Coues go later. They're more like the 12th or 15th to the end of the month.
I got you. And that makes sense, just like a latitude difference, because they're like a month behind our deer in Colorado.
Yeah,
a month and change or something like that. And how many total hunts are you doing down there now?
We do a lot. Phil Kramer, he's my director of operations. And, for years, Dar Colburn and I started the business together, and Colburn and Scott Outfitters. And Dar, has been an amazing part of the journey of the whole process. Now I've got Phil Kramer, and he's actually running the hunts day to day, director of operations. Dar's still doing hunts here and there. But for deer, a couple hundred hunts between the different species. And then we do Gould's turkey in the spring as well. And Gould's is something, it'll be our 16th season this year. And I'm really looking forward to the spring on the Gould's turkey. They're just an amazing bird. They got a lot of white on them. They gobble great. They strut great. But so we do the sheep, do the mule deer, the Coues, and the Gould's turkey.
Yeah. And I have to ask, I want to get into some of the species stuff because I just find it super interesting from a business standpoint even, and some of the viewers might be interested in that. But I do feel like you have a unique perspective as a guy who's booking hundreds of hunts, but also somebody who's been on the other side of it as a client. And I know you used to outfit here in Arizona a bit. I mean, you've guided and hunted all over the place. If you could give a guy like a crash course on, hey, you want to book hunts, but you want to get the best value for your money. You want to make sure. I feel like a lot of booking hunts is about downside protection. It's not necessarily that everybody's
when
strict.
Things are good, it's good.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's good, right? But what people really don't want to do is they don't want to waste a week of their time and be frustrated, and then go somewhere on a trip where the expectations are different than what they expected. I feel like that's the fundamental problem. But do you have what's your advice to somebody who's new to booking hunts?
I think the main thing is you need to talk to people that have gone with the outfitter or the guide specifically. And, I know that sounds elementary, but the reality is word of mouth and people that have hunted with you, in my opinion, is the most important thing as someone booking hunts. You want to hear from people that have been there.
Yeah.
Every outfitter and guide can have, 6 or 8 testimonials on their website,
Sure.
But that really doesn't cut it because, those could be, aunts, uncles, and cousins and whatnot. But if you're going with an outfitter that does a lot of business, they should have a sizable, hundreds of names and testimonials, phone numbers, emails, that you can talk to and just, call up and ask some of those guys questions. How was your hunt?
Sure.
How did it go? When, some questions like you bring up, when things are good, it's good.
Yeah, yeah.
But, maybe say, was there anything in the hunt where there was a struggle and, did the guides have to push through anything? And, how were the conditions and whatnot? Because, I feel like most operations, when the hunting is good and conditions are good,
It's easy. To keep
it's
people,
easy.
yeah,
And
happy.
it's not until, the rig breaks down or, you have some gear, some catastrophic gear failure or something that you realize how good the guide is that you're going with. And I think a lot of it too is, talk to the people. Questions I would ask are like, how calm were they? How, when it came down to actually harvesting the animal, when it came down to getting on the animal, how did they react? Could you tell that they had been there many times? How much pressure did they put on you as a hunter to make a fast shot or take your time?
Sure.
How calm did they stay with you and how comfortable did they make you feel? I think those are all questions because I try and mentor a lot of my younger guides in the business and try and explain to them that these people are not hiring you because you're a good hunter. It's
Right.
a given. If you're a guide, you're a good hunter. But can you communicate with people? Can you treat people with respect? Can you talk to them with respect? Can you put them in a position to succeed? All of those things that I think make a professional guide worth the money that you're paying them. Did they evaluate the animal? Did they stay calm? Did they act in an efficient manner, an effective manner to say, okay, this is our target buck, and this is what we're going to do to try and get him killed. And it's kind of a long answer to your question, but like those are all things that I would want to know going into a hunt.
And it does bring up some things that I have noticed, and that's that you'll talk to people about a hunt they were on, and they will have a smile on their face, and they'll tell you, man, it was a great adventure, got whatever animal I was looking for, and they have a very positive reflection on the hunt, and then they kind of will finish off with, but the guide was this or that, or the operation was a little wonky this way. And I think that's really telling from a psychological standpoint, because that person is actually giving a positive review,
Right.
but the controllable stuff
Right.
wasn't actually done that well.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that a lot, and I think it's just hard, regardless of what we think about ourselves or think about how we think. I think it's hard for us to, as hunters, to divide or to separate, just like success of killing the animal with the operation. I think that's really difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up something that I talk about with my guides all the time about control the things you can control.
Yeah.
And Phil, being the director of operations, he tries to make sure, we're controlling everything that we actually can put our hands on. And then, a lot of it is a vibe in camp. Control the things you can control and be a good person. Some of the things too are like, I hate it when guides get out in front of clients and
Sure.
then when the client gets there, then they take off walking again. Or if the client has needs you to carry his gun, needs you to carry his backpack. There's things that, they're hiring a guide for
Sure.
a reason. And you could have the argument that you need to be prepared as a hunter. But I also try and tell a lot of my young guides, like, man, sometimes you need to literally carry the client. You need to, every weakness that they have, you need to make up for. And the big one for me is, once you found an animal you want to harvest, really trying to be calm, to make a good calm shot. And I've talked about before on other podcasts, like, I always tell guides, don't ever come back to camp and say the client missed a shot and be bad talking the client. I always like to say, if they missed the shot, it's because you did something wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it was 125 yards. It was standing still in broadside eyes. I don't care what it was doing.
Yeah.
You needed to be talking in the guy's ear, and if you have to put the crosshairs on the animal for the guy in his backpacking, let him get down in there. But like, control everything that you can control, and
Sure.
once he squeezes, if he makes a bad squeeze, then so be it. But if I look back at most all circumstances where that shot process maybe didn't go right, it was something that got the hunter's heart rate up, or he was nervous, or he was anxious about it. And being a professional is trying to make the hunter feel as comfortable as possible.
Right. It's funny, man. Probably the single hunt that I guided, Jay, that taught me more about guiding than any other hunt was guiding my wife when she killed her desert ram, because my wife doesn't have the same social construct or like social pressure to take my bullshit like a lot of clients do, or a client might.
And she knows you better than
yeah,
anyone.
yeah, exactly. But also there's the dynamic of a client wants to hunt. He's hunting with Jay, so Jay's just inherently right because he's got this catalog of experience or whatever. My wife doesn't care about that at all.
Right.
And I realized, like, on her desert sheep hunt, she had lots of frustration, and it got harder. The shot opportunities became harder and harder for her because this dynamic just kept like just piling up on her, and it was pressure that I was putting on her it was like how are we in 6 days into this hunt that we could have killed the same ram on the first day, like stuff that it became kind of a mess. We ended up having a great time. She got a ram and all that. We ended up killing it with the whole family. But I learned a lot about that, and really reflecting on it is like, it was my fault. Like, the issues we had were my fault. They really weren't her fault. And
Once you take that mindset as a guide, it will help you immensely.
yeah,
Like when you really take all of that in and take it upon yourself to like make it part of the main part of your job is to make them feel more comfortable, even if you
Sure.
don't get the animal that everyone wants you to get, and even the client, like you have to make them feel comfortable.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, it's a thing that you learn over time, and the thing that's weird is in some ways it kind of sneaks in as higher success in the end. Like, they're actually, I noticed with my guides, like seeing a bunch of different guides, Jay, there would be guys that I would hunt with. They seemed very good from a skill set standpoint, but I saw the data, right? Like, this individual, I saw him guide 10 hunts in a row, and then I see another guide that I would view maybe even less experienced with the region, the species, whatever, him guide 10 in the parallel place, right? Like, same seasons pretty much. And one guy would have triple the success. And when you dig into it, a lot of it is what you're talking about. It's how they handle that dynamic around the shot opportunity, even managing fitness. Like, mountain goat hunts, fitness is huge. It's like a naive guide will take a hunter up. Every time he sees a billy, he'll take a hunter
Right,
up.
inefficient stalks and stuff.
The good guide, when he goes up, that goat's dying.
Coming back.
Yeah. They don't
We're not
go
going up until we're killing.
Yeah, unless we know.
Yeah.
But it's really a management thing. It's a physical management thing. But I think a lot of this stuff, and please do disagree if you do, but I think a lot of that stuff applies outside of the guide hunter relationship. I think it's father and kids. I think it's buddies hunting that have a dispersion and experience. I think it applies to that too.
100%. I agree with you.
I mean, if you want a guy to have a bad result, sit there and whisper to every time a bull elk turns broadside in the brush, tell him, shoot, shoot, shoot. Oh, no, stop, shoot, shoot, shoot. That's like a formula for shitty outcome.
You're going to have them rush for sure, and you don't want anyone to rush.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Something I had talked about on Jay Nickel. Jay Nickel is coming down on one of our DIY Coues hunts in Mexico. I had kind of talked about don't get inside their bubble.
Yeah.
And it was crazy on Facebook and Instagram. I mean, I just got amazing backlash, which kind of shocked me about talking about specifically about Coues deer and getting inside their bubble. And I got a lot of archers that said, well, I'm definitely need to crack the 300-yard bubble. And I said, well, with some of them, I said, well, I believe there's an archery bubble too.
Sure.
Of like when you're stalking an animal, don't get inside that bubble unless you're really meaning business.
Yeah.
And I got some pushback on, my distance with Coues deer is like, don't get inside of if you're rifle hunting, try to stay outside of 300 yards of a deer you want to kill.
I've seen the post.
And, I like to talk with my clients before we go Coues deer hunting specifically and sheep hunting of like, we're going to do our best that nothing's going to happen fast. We're going to stay outside their bubble. We're hopefully going to be shooting at something that doesn't even know we're in the country. We're going to have all day to, get a rest and get totally comfortable with that's the animal we want to harvest. And I feel like when you're booking hunts, back to your original question, like, if you get the sense that your guide is not into it for efficiency and not into it for like has a process, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
Most great professionals, guides that I know, outfitters that I know, they all have a process.
Right.
It may differ for, their process may be different than others, but they have like a systematic process with how they do everything.
Sure.
And those are traits that I look for when I'm booking a hunt myself, is like, this guy's really dialed in. And not necessarily going with someone that you think is the best hunter, because a lot of times those people aren't the greatest guides.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because that gets into the business, right? Like, just a couple days ago, had a young guy email me about getting into guiding. You probably get dozens of these a year, if not 100 plus or something. And everybody comes in with the default belief that it's all about a superior hunting skill.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
it's great to be a guy that has great skills, but there's
Sure.
so much more to it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, some of the best guides that I know, they're great hunters, but there's other hunters that are probably better. But can you take someone that's not a good hunter
Sure.
and give them the same experience and have them have the same outcome as a great hunter?
Yeah.
That's the true measure of, I think, a great guide, for sure.
No, absolutely, man. Let's circle back to the actual concept in that post. And so my understanding, Jay, is what you're talking about is this dynamic, and we can talk about it in the archery or rifle context. But in the rifle context with Coues deer, and for all species, there is going to be, depending on the situation, a distance where all of a sudden it's a lot harder to do things. It's harder to move your rest. You can't make any noise. It might just become a matter of time before they smell you or see you. So in general, you want to stay out of that so you have time to make a shot. Is this the concept we're talking about?
Yeah, and I mean, I've been taught the concept so many times because of the mistakes
Sure.
that I've made. And so what I've realized is that every animal has a bubble. And if you can stay outside of that bubble, and you know, I had a lot of people jump on me saying that I was advocating, you know, 700 and 1,000 yard shots, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is, once you understand as a hunter that every animal has a bubble, that if you can stay outside that, you're going to be more efficient,
Sure.
the better situations you will put yourself in. And, you know, like you said, if the animal doesn't see you, smell you, doesn't hear you, and he has no idea you're there, you have a much better chance, number one, of like identifying that animal, classifying, figuring out if that's the one you want,
Right.
making sure if it's, you know, the age or the maturity or the rack or whatever characteristics you're looking for. You know, once you kind of pinpoint that, staying outside the bubble, then you can move your pack around, you can get adjusted, you can mess with your tripod, you can get your gun set in the, you know, in the tripod or a bipod or whatever you're using on a backpack. But the most important thing is now you're going to be taking a shot at an animal that has no idea you're
Yeah.
there. The worst thing that I've seen is when animals are on alert and you go to shooting at them. If you were to miss them, they are a lot of times just taking off running as fast as they can, and then you a lot of times never get a follow-up shot, or if you do, it's going to be, you know, some sort of running shot, and
Yep.
that's low probability. And so I'm very adamant, you know, despite some of the people on social media that argued with me, and it's fine to argue with me. It's just one of those things that I've, for, you know, 30 years, this will be my 30th year down in Mexico, that I've learned, especially with Coues deer, is like, you know, clanking these tripod legs together, or, you know, zippers on backpacks, or certain things outside of that 300 yards, you can get away with a lot more.
Sure.
Now, for the archers, it's the same principle of like, you know, if you're sneaking in on a Coues deer buck that's bedded or feeding, like, you kind of get around that 100 yard, 80, 90, 100 yard mark. You get much inside of that, it's very difficult to get in that, you know, 30, 40, 50 yard range without them knowing you're there.
Sure.
And, you know, it goes to also putting stalks on animals. And Coues deer have taught me all these because I've blown so many opportunities.
Just so I understand, Jay, from my own understanding, like where would you put them as more wary than mule deer, more wary than elk? All right, guys, in some of my content, you're gonna see that I've been using this chest holster from Invader Concepts. This is with my 10 millimeter. I also use it with my Glock 19 and even a PMR 30. I'm gonna do a bunch of content here in the next couple months on that around bear defense. It should be interesting. It looks a little awkward to have your gun under your bino harness, but if you test out all the different variations, it is the best, and you have it on you all the time. I do have a discount code. It's CliffG, and it's for 10% off. Go check them out.
So I would
Where
put
you
them
in that?
equally as wary as a very mature mule deer.
Okay.
You know how the
Yeah.
big mule deer, the mature, you
That's
know,
been around
5-year-old
hunting,
that have
like,
been
yeah.
around. And, you know, I have very little experience hunting whitetails in the Midwest and back east, but from what I hear, they're just as wary as can be. but for what I hunt, the Coues deer is definitely like a big mature mule deer. Like you can't make any mistakes. And the more mature Coues deer you get, those big deer that we're after, those 5-year-old deer and up, you cannot make any mistakes.
Yeah.
The one thing that will get a Coues deer killed more than anything is even when you make a mistake, they're so habitual to their home range that if you have enough time, even if you blow them out, they typically will come back within a couple of days.
Yeah.
Whereas like mule deer are so nomadic, a lot of times if you blow a mule deer out or a sheep out, they could be gone and you'll have to relocate them. Coues, for anybody out there listening, like if you have enough time, most of the time, if you give them some space and stay out of their zone and just let them calm back down, in a few days they'll pop back up, within probably 300 to 500 yards of where you spooked them.
Gotcha. And I got you sidetracked there. I think we were talking about the zone in terms of archery on them, but yeah, no, I agree with you, Jay, and I'm assuming that the negative feedback was related to like why not get closer, right?
Yeah, why not get closer,
yeah.
And the reality is I've just been there and done that, and if you want to prove, and again, this is just the way I do it. It doesn't make it right.
Sure.
But I try and be efficient in everything that I do, and the people that said I'd rather get closer to make a more efficient shot, totally understand. If you're not comfortable shooting 300 yards laying down, then get closer.
Yeah.
My response would be most every Coues deer hunter, and quite honestly most Western hunters that are very into it, I mean, they can shoot groups at 300 like they used to be able to at 100. So if you're not comfortable with a 300-yard shot laying down in good conditions, you either need a new rifle or you need a lot more practice.
Sure.
But
well, I think it comes down to, though, Jay, like it's even in my mind a very naive question that I myself have asked probably hundreds of clients. You get guys into camp, and the first question you ask is how far are you comfortable shooting? Which is kind of an absurd question to ask a guy without a bunch of other variables.
Yeah, you need more context.
Yeah, because if a guy says, okay, I'm comfortable shooting, there could be a guy that's comfortable shooting 400 yards, but he has to be on his belly, prone, and have 10 minutes. There can be another guy that can shoot 400 yards with 15 seconds.
Right.
From backpack on to, maybe not 15 seconds, but 25, 30 seconds from backpack on to shooting the animal, he can do that. That's a totally different individual.
100%.
And I think that plays into what you're talking about, because depending on our skill set and the different, and even just where we have focused, getting a 300-yard prone, patient, tons of time shot for most guys is way easier than 200 yards, the animal's already moving and already knows where you're at.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that could be a recipe for disaster for a lot of people. 100 yards, 200 yards, if that animal is alert and you're rushing, I don't care what distance, if you're rushing, it's a recipe for disaster for sure.
Yeah, it's hard quick. It gets hard quick. Do you, I just don't know the answer to this, Jay, but can you shoot suppressors in Mexico?
So I know people that have taken them. As of right now, the actual law and rule is no.
Okay.
So anybody listening, I would definitely not take them. I know people that have. I think certain people at the military or police that you would run into would not like that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So yeah, I wouldn't recommend
It's not worth that
I
hassle.
think maybe eventually it will change, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because one thing I have observed with a point of this conversation is that if an animal sees you, if they see you when you're about to shoot and they've
they you know how sometimes an elk will look at you and he kind of knows what you are. He kind of knows something's up there, but he's not hauling ass yet because he hasn't confirmed yet, and you got the wind good. So, but he's staring at you. He knows, and you're still getting up for a shot, and you take a shot. If you're shooting with a suppressor in that moment, and he's looking at you, he knows where you're at, and he's gonna turn around and run. If you shoot that at that same bull with a suppressor and he hasn't and he's not looking in your direction, a lot of times they won't.
They don't know where it's
they
coming
don't know
from.
where it's coming from. And so you're giving up that. If you get too close and they see you, you're giving up that opportunity that, I mean, for better or worse, it's for sure a function of suppressors. A lot of times animals don't know where you're at.
Yeah.
And you get another opportunity that's damn near as good as the first one a lot of the time. But man, if you get too close and they see you, you give that up.
And that's
you know.
too, with the bubble, even if you're not shooting a suppressor, a lot of times if you shoot at over 300 yards, you're going to get a second shot,
Sure.
and it's probably going to be a standing shot because a lot of times it'll sizzle over their back and they're, dirt flies and they're kind of looking around and like
Yeah.
that. And with the suppressor, you may get 2 or 3 shots,
Sure.
maybe more if they don't know where you're at and you're outside that bubble. So, yeah, I just I kind of got a kick out of it on social because I think a lot of times some of the things that I say get taken out of context, like a lot of
course.
a lot of people, and if they really truly knew me or followed me more, they'd be like, "Oh, he doesn't mean that."
Yeah, you're not saying that guys should shoot at 800 yards
Yeah.
at everything or whatever. No, but there's a truth to what you're saying. And I've in other podcasts I've talked with guys that there's for sure value in having some practice, offhand shooting and that sort of thing. There's value in that, but you still got to understand that there's a lot of value in just having a peaceful shot and some time on your hands. So I think it's a valid thing to talk about. But on the species front, Jay, not to sidetrack you a little bit, I want to talk about the Gould's turkey deal. Because you know what the analogy, and hopefully you view this as a compliment to me, but in the business, when I was a little kid, nobody knew about like British Columbia bear hunts. Like that was a species thing that nobody was going to British Columbia to hunt black bears on Vancouver Island or anything. But Jim Shockey changed that whole thing. And he did it because he popularized the species, and then he was involved in the outfitting. I feel like you did that with Coues deers, dude. Or Coues deer, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to take any of that credit because there's been a lot of people in front of me. But, from the first time I ever saw the Coues deer and hunted them, just everything about them has fascinated me.
Sure.
We have them here in Arizona, and my grandfather being a rancher in southern Arizona, he's passed away now, but just hearing the stories of the cowboys and the other ranchers talking about this little deer and talking about the the whitetail and talking about the Coues deer, it just created a fascination with me. And then when I was able to drive myself and actually hunt myself into college and whatnot, and could get out when I first started going to Mexico. This will be my 30th season going to Mexico.
Oh, really?
And we have phenomenal hunting in Arizona for Coues deer, and then we have great hunting in Mexico. And the thing I really like about Mexico is you go to these ranches and it feels like you're going back in time like 100 years.
Sure.
And just to have that feeling of, you're going into the landscape of unpressured areas. And granted, there's been, most ranches have been hunted, the old never been hunted.
Yeah.
The Coues deer themselves if you haven't had a chance to hunt them, you need to get down there because they're an amazing animal. They're super, super wary. Like I was saying earlier, the mature bucks are very wary. They get pretty nocturnal. And they're just cool. A big one will be 110, 15 pounds.
Yeah.
Rack size, they'll be 13, 14, maybe 15 inches wide, and they're kind of baskety, and they're just a really cool animal. It's kind of like a niche thing,
Sure.
like you say, Shockey with the bears. I love the Gould's turkey. It's kind of a niche thing. The Coues deer, it's kind of niche. There's guys
Yeah,
like I've never
it's
hunted.
niche, but for sure, at least I have seen over the last decade, it seems to grow and have grown in popularity.
Yeah, the popularity. I think too, being able to hunt them in the rut, like we've talked about in January, like here in the States, you can't hunt them in the rut. So most of the hunts here in Arizona are October, November, and December, and some of them maybe these December hunts after Christmas, you get a little bit of rut activity.
Yeah.
But then in January, typically, for the last 25, 30 years, there's been the archery hunts where you can hunt them in the rut, but in Mexico, you can hunt them with a rifle.
Yeah.
I think ultimately they're the perfect spot and stock animal because they are wary. And they're small, and so they're real glassing intensive type animals. They're real spot and stock. You have to use a lot of contour to be able to get up and glass across, and it's kind of like a poor man's sheep hunt. I've heard of other animals, like the Barbary sheep and stuff, talk about the poor man Coues or sheep hunt, but for me, the Coues deer, I feel like if you take a good Coues deer hunter and you send them anywhere in the world to hunt anything,
Sure.
they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I just feel like they're a wary enough animal and they're cagey enough that a successful Coues deer hunter has to figure out how to be a good hunter to get them successful, routinely.
Yeah, they're just pretty unforgiving.
Yeah, they're very unforgiving. Some of the young deer and stuff
Sure.
can be stupid, like a lot of immature animals, but you get these mature ones.
Yeah.
And then, from the first time I ever was able to get my hands on a really big buck, it's kind of like big mule deer with me. I love big mule deer. And they're fewer and they're harder to come by these days. But you get your hands on a few big ones, it really gets in your skin.
Yeah.
Like big sheep, big elk. I like all.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, man. It's almost like it feels almost like a different species. Mule deer for me, because I don't have the experience with Coues deer, and I don't want this to come across as asinine or insulting to anybody, but there's a lot of guys that the biggest mule deer they've ever seen or felt or been right close to is a 150-inch deer. But the minute you go grab like a 200-inch deer, you're like, oh, this is a different animal.
Yeah, it's been very fortunate to grow up here in Arizona and hunt around some of the our game and fish. I've been on their case a little bit lately from
Sure.
being a little liberal with the tag allocations and whatnot, and I feel like our age class is slipping. But growing up here, getting, Arizona and some of the great stuff. I'm 52, and being able to see, Utah and Colorado and New Mexico and Arizona, some of these states, like, great time for elk, great time for mule deer,
Yeah.
great time for Coues, and being able to put your hands on some of these big deer, big elk, big sheep. The big ones they're really neat.
Yeah.
They will definitely, they've wormed their way into my heart for sure.
Yeah. There's something about seeing like the species at its full potential is just neat. And
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about, I've had the fortune to help manage and manage some incredible ranches for some different animals over the years, and then with, all the ranches that I have in Mexico. For me, one of the things I really enjoy is taking a piece of property and trying to limit the harvest and trying to be very picky about the animals that we do harvest, and trying to manage for age class and quality. And I've been very fortunate over the last half of my life to be able to really kind of have a hands-on approach with some of these properties and see the work that we've put in come to fruition, and see some of the animals that we've nurtured and let grow and just let live, and finally harvest them when they've really reached a mature age, and been able to see their antler characteristics go from this to that is something I love. I absolutely love it.
I got a question on that, and I guess it's more of a wildlife management question, but I think you might have a unique level of experience with it, maybe on those ranches, but I'm more thinking kind of the Mexico ranches. Whenever you're managing a place for, say, bigger Coues deer or whatever species it is, your sheep or mule deer down in Mexico, do you like? Does it? Is there just a? Is there a perfect, like, a negative correlation to overall opportunity and having trophy animals, or do you see that there's just more animals on the landscape so you can just harvest more? Like, what do you actually see?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to getting age class in your herd is to obviously stop shooting animals.
Yeah.
And the hard part, and not a biologist, and I've had my world turned upside down by
Sure.
a few biologists when they explained to me that, Jay, you're letting this bull go or this buck go for so many years, and then you're going to harvest them, but and maybe you're shooting what you think is a cull buck or a management buck, but did you realize that cull buck or management actually is having beautiful offspring?
Oh, sure.
And that just blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, the studies show that not necessarily the big giant bull, the 400-inch bull, is having 400-inch bull
Sure.
calves. And biologists are laughing hearing me say that, but the reality is I've always tried to manage for age class and let as many animals live as possible and try and whatever we shoot them at an older age, whether maybe they don't have a big rack, but try and get age class onto the landscape. And I've noticed, like, we have a handful of our ranches that we've implemented like a 110 and over, so now obviously age, but I've also gone with a minimum score and said, they have to be 110 to shoot.
Yeah.
And what we're noticing is on those properties, obviously, as those 100-inch, 102, 105, 107, 108 bucks get one more year, and a lot of them, not all of them, but some of them will then turn into, 115, 118,
Right.
120 Coues deer. Similar to like elk, if we're trying to get bulls, 375 and over, what you've got to do is those 350, 360 bulls that are incredible bulls.
Yeah.
You got to give them another year and then see what they'll do. And all the trail cam stuff that we do on these ranches, sometimes those deer never get any bigger.
Yeah.
But I always say bet on the animal, give them as much opportunity as you can to get bigger. And some of them genetically, that's 105, that's the biggest they're going to be, and then then they start putting on a lot of age and mass, but their rack never gets any bigger. Once I have a couple years of data of something like that, or on some of these elk places where like a bull's 350, 350, 350, 350, like he's just probably not going to get any better, then we go ahead and say, okay, that one's probably one we can harvest.
Yep.
I don't know that it's a real scientific way to manage, but it's the way we do it, and it's working. It's worked. It worked really well at the Ot 6 Ranch. It's working where I'm at now in Montana, and it definitely works in Mexico. The one variable in Mexico that is really hard to get, wrap your arms around is they don't have much for lion dogs down there. So our lion populations are they're just
The
rampant.
predators are an issue.
I mean, I've seen over 50 mountain lions in my life, and 80% of them or maybe more in Mexico with my binoculars. And they definitely keep the deer in check. And the thing that's heartbreaking a lot of times those bucks we've let grow for a couple years, they end up killing.
Yeah, and there may be certain lions that focus on isolated bucks or whatever. Sure, and I would notice that even up in the mountains when we were lion hunting a lot. You'd find a lion who he kind of it's not a. I thought it was a myth, but then I realized, treeing the same lions multiple times, you'd find one lion he liked to kill big bulls.
Yeah.
Because he's finding them isolated or whatever.
I think they have a little instinct in them that's, it's a challenge to them, and they kind of focus on it, or they focus on certain areas where those mature animals go and kind of
Yeah.
hide by themselves, and
Yep.
they get good at killing them.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of interesting stuff there, man. The one about the genetics,
It'll blow your mind. Man.
yeah, you know, it's what reminds me. I mean, I've been around the livestock business as a kid a whole lot. You know, it's just the idea of phenotypes, right? You could have a bull and half his calves are awesome and half his calves are shit. And they're because he throws these two different types of phenotypes. I think I'm using the right term, but bulls do the same thing. The bull can look like junk, but he can throw bulls that grow up to be 400-inch bulls, and then half their siblings will never be bigger than 320. You know.
And you know, half the equation is the cow too. So
Sure.
I think the hard part is when we're managing free range properties for elk and mule deer and coues and all this stuff. Like, part of me would love to throw them in a fence and really study it. And I know there's studies out there that have been
Sure.
done a lot on white-tailed deer, not as much on some of the other animals, but you know, to really try and figure out the genetic part. And what makes, you know, one bull or one buck
Yeah.
kick off something great. But when the biologist is like, yeah, Jay, I mean, it's proven in South Texas, this study, that study, where this buck, that when you look at him, he's just a junk buck, but look at the offspring compared to this one over here.
Sure.
And it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I still think you have to go off of age, and especially when you're managing these properties free range, you just try and harvest. Let every young one grow as much as you can. Watch their antler characteristics, watch their body types, and then try and make educated decisions on that. And how I do it is usually try and get them to that mature age. You know, with mule deer, try and get them to that 5-year-old mark. With elk, you know, try and get them to that 8-year-old mark.
Yeah.
And then once they get there, then really watch them close and see if they start going downhill. And that's when, you know, they've probably passed their best potential.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about it, Jay, just looking at public land management of deer and elk and then the private places I've been on, what's kind of makes me a little suspicious of how things are managed is the places where they're managing for trophies, they tend to have, like, let's say per chunk of habitat, way higher yield across, like cows, management bulls, big bulls. And I'm talking about, like, I've seen ranches in Colorado that are adjacent to the wilderness I hunted, and these guys on pretty much the same acreage of what I'm hunting are sustainably harvesting like 10x the elk. So I've always been very suspicious of this idea that trophy is completely inverse to like sustainable harvest. And I think you have to make this argument, well, they must not be limited by carrying capacity on the public as much as they say they are. And that's, like, we could talk about it for hours, but I actually think that that's the case in a lot of cases. I think there's a lot of reasons, and a lot of times I back up into Colorado. There's a lot of reasons that they're killing a lot of animals. That, you know, there's political reasons, budgetary reasons, just people want to, you know, there's all of that. And I think because of that, we have a lot of areas that are not reaching their full potential, not just in terms of trophy, I mean, just like hunting opportunity.
Sure.
I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I think the idea that they're completely inverse is not necessarily the case. I think when you have a lot of animals, you have big ones and you have a lot of other ones too.
Yeah, I mean, the public perception is some of these ranches that maybe manage for age class, that there's, you know, just tons of 370 bulls or 350 bulls. I mean, you have to have all of those age classes in order to kind of get a few that will get.
Yeah, just mathematically.
Yeah, I mean, because not every bull will be a 370 plus bull, or not every buck will be 180 plus. It's just the way it is, or, you know, a Coues deer. So, you know, I think it's been kind of a love of mine to just be able to get on these properties. And, you know, we have, you know, close to 60 properties in Mexico. Some of them I've had for 20 years.
Sure.
And I just know, I know our properties, and I know sometimes one of the challenges trying to talk the ownership into limiting the harvest. That's one of my biggest challenges. Because, you know, they get dollars for every deer or every animal that gets killed. And So sometimes you have to shoot less animals, and what it makes you do is you have to pay way more for the ones that you do
Yeah.
shoot, because you're basically eating tags just to keep the ranch and whatnot. But, there's a lot more people that are highly more qualified than I am, but I do know that, if in general, if people just, I think a lot of people would love to just shoot any animal on
Sure.
the last day just to fill their tag when they go and throw a buck in the garage and there's 30 of them that are in the garage.
Yeah.
If we didn't have that mentality, we'd probably have some older age class running
Sure.
around on the landscape. And nothing against people harvesting for meat and filling their freezer, but a lot of it too, unfortunately, is I think just I have to go home with a buck, and
Yeah.
with social media these days and whatnot, filling your tags and being able to prove that you're a great hunter is a reality.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, Jay. Like I people will bring it up to me almost in a way, in like a confrontational way, like as if like, oh, Cliff, you're part of the problem. But the thing is, so I'll get this every once in a while in an email or a comment on a post or something. I actually understand the perspective of this is kind of an issue.
Yeah.
Like there are animals that are probably getting killed just for social media. Do you have thoughts on it? Do you have perspective on it?
Again, for me, it's not about, I'm not against people harvesting stuff for meat to feed their families and whatnot. But you'll get people using that as their argument, but they killed 5 or 6 elk this year.
Sure.
And I have no problem with killing 5 or 6 elk, but it's like you can't really use that as your argument.
Yeah.
If I'm there to feed my family and you shoot 6 elk and you have
Yeah,
shoot 2 people
you're
in your
just saying
family.
like a line, like what the reality is.
I for one, for one, I don't harvesting an animal is like the I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I can go on many hunts and never shoot anything.
Yeah.
And I get some flack for it from the standpoint of being a quote unquote trophy hunter, and it's more just like I don't need to kill to prove anything.
Sure.
And if I'm after a certain type of animal, maturity of animal, like I'm not going to shoot unless it's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And maybe that comes with me getting older or whatnot. But I think the public pressures of I'm a huge proponent of social media. I think there's a lot of positives with social media.
Yeah.
One of which is you can I've always said I want to shed a positive light on hunting and fishing as much as possible. Who doesn't like the tug on the end of their line, or seeing a big buck come into the field? And I think social media can be a huge positive light in our world, but unfortunately with that comes the negativity of some people choose to go down the negative route and bring up all the negativity with it. So that's kind of not the answer to your question, but it's like, yes, do I think some people harvest things just so that they can show a picture of it? Yes, on social media. But it's really no different than 30 years ago before social media, when they just wanted to show a picture to their buddies or put it in a magazine or whatnot.
Yeah, or even just have it in the back of the truck and drive it down to the post
around
office.
and showing it off. And,
so it's the same dynamic.
And so I say, what are you doing it for? And just kind of keep yourself in check. The only thing I can do is keep myself in check. And I can't impose what I do on other people.
Yeah.
But we can pose the question of what are you doing it for?
Yeah.
And they can answer their own. Everyone has their own reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that one of the more important things is that is not trying to if people are doing things legally, people can have different reasons for doing it. That's fine. But it is an interesting topic because I'm trying to think. It would have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I burnt my elk points in Colorado. I guess it would have been maybe 6 or 7 years ago, because it was a year before I was no longer a resident, and I burnt my points there, and saw lots of bulls, had a ton of fun. It was actually ranching for Wildlife Ranch, one of Dean's ranches, a mutual friend of ours, and I didn't kill a bull. Had a ton of fun. Just didn't find didn't find a big one. You know, I wanted to kill a big one on, you know, burning my points. But there's a tinge at the end of a hunt in that regard, where when you have a social media presence, there is a tinge of like, oh, I almost feel embarrassed.
Right.
Because
Were you unsuccessful?
Yeah, people know I'm hunting, and I'm not going to show them a dead bull. And that I think's unfortunate. In my own mind, I think, oh, that's unfortunate that I'm slightly embarrassed by that, because that kind of does take away. In my mind, it's like, yeah, I don't need to kill one if I'm if I'm going to be embarrassed by it, like whatever. But it is something, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, one could argue that someone that kills a bull elk for 30 years in a row, regardless of size, might be a way better hunter than someone like me that doesn't care if he kills one every 20 years.
Yeah.
I would argue the guy that's shooting one every year on public land and shooting 30 in a row is a phenomenal hunter. But it's also, for me, it's come to a point of like, the older I get, the more it's not about being a great hunter.
Sure.
It's more of, you know, how can I do the best that I can do to shed a positive light on the outdoors, hunting and fishing, and not dive into any of the negativity, even if some of it gets cast my way. The real thing is to just rise above it and, you know, try and help as many people as I can, be as good of an influence as I can, and that's really all I can control, you know. You know, whether someone thinks that they're a better hunter or I'm a worse hunter, or
it's not really on my radar. No, I love that perspective, and that's a good way to look at it. But it is a thing. It's just kind of a funny deal.
Guys, I've been using onX Maps for almost 2 decades now, hunting, guiding, outfitting. It is the gold standard tool when it comes to mapping software in the hunting world. They've been a huge supporter of my content for multiple years, so if you want to support me and you want to support them, use my code CliffG for 20% off at onxmaps.com. It is an awesome tool that I use all the time when I'm preparing for hunts, and I use it almost every single day in the field. For navigation, knowing unit boundaries, knowing private land boundaries, it is the tool you have to have.
To me, I have to kind of like laugh at myself a little bit about it. I'm like, what? People are worried about this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I can see though from your perspective though, at the end of that hunt, you know, with all of the content that you do that does help people with all the skinning and field dressing and, you know, pointing out stuff with how you do things, you know, I could see how maybe not harvesting a bull, because that was a great opportunity to show somebody something.
Yeah.
And I get that, but I also get the point of like, you know, you've been around it long enough and you just didn't see one that just got you going. And you don't have to kill one to be like, I'm the great white hunter.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think even you probably see this with different species. You know, if I went Gould's turkey hunting with you, I'd probably just shoot the first Gould's turkey that came in.
Yeah, and be like, well, what did I shoot?
Awesome. Yeah. So it's a journey on all the different types of hunts.
Well,
and that sort of thing
that
too.
is one of the things I really like about turkey hunting in general, not even specifically Gould's, is, you know, it's gobbling, strutting, it's just fun. Guys will be like, well, you know, how long are the beards and how long are the spurs of the birds you kill? I'm like, I mean, the last time I've measured a beard or spurs, like, I just don't get into it. And they're like, well, I saw one, you had 5 beards and it had, you know, this and that, had inch-long spurs. I'm like, yeah, that's great. But the one that just comes running in, strutting and gobbling, you know, with a 6-inch beard is going to get
it's way cool too.
You know, so I'm kind of talking out both sides of my mouth. I talk about, you know, with turkeys, for whatever reason, it's more about just the fun, the way they come in, the way they strut. Because, you know, a turkey's lifespan, maybe, especially Gould's, maybe they'll make it to 4.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know,
they turn over
if it's a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, they're going to get shot
Yeah,
regardless. I mean,
sure.
we don't shoot jakes. Jakes are 1-year-olds that, just have
little stumpy beards.
But it is a kind of a refreshing thing about a lot of bird hunting is
there's not that pressure.
there's not that
Yeah.
pressure of like,
Yep.
and then with the app that we've developed with the horn scorer, you get labeled as, it's just a antler, junkie or
Sure.
which I mean, I would argue everyone loves a big buck. Everyone
Yeah, of
loves
course.
a big
Yeah.
bull.
If they admit it or not.
I mean,
yeah.
the whole purpose of designing the app was basically just to make people, give them a resource to help them be better at what they do and be able to evaluate whether they're looking for a 150-inch mule deer or a 200-inch mule deer. Just to be able to go on these hunts and be able to say, this is a 150, this is a 170, this is a 190.
And there's a lot of value. I mean, for a lot of people hunt so many different areas, or they draw this once in a lifetime sheep tag. There's a ton of value in knowing what's even appropriate to harvest. You know, and I mean that from you can come to a unit and just not really know. Okay, I'm looking at the first ram of the hunt. Is it the biggest ram I'm going to see?
Yeah, and being able to kind of arm people going into the field is the whole premise of the app, of trying to help them realize when they go to Nevada on a sheep hunt or go to Colorado and they've never been there, they've never seen a sheep. Or,
Sure.
Go on an oudad, like, what are you looking at? What are some of the characteristics, the body types, just give them a feel of what they're looking at and help them make a good decision.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's very useful in that regard. Where are you guys at on the app? Like, what's
It's funny you ask. We did a podcast a couple months ago with you when we launched the app, and we have gotten an unbelievable amount of feedback from hunters, and we actually switched app developers, and we are in the process right now of completely renovating the whole app. Blake and I and Justin, we really, I think, made a great product, but it's so feature rich that for the layperson just opening it up and using it, the flow was a little bit difficult to follow. So right now we're just totally renovating, diving in and changing the app completely from a flow perspective, to be able to get people into the guides, get people into the new scores, get people into using the different line reference tools and some of the stuff. So hopefully here pretty soon in the next couple months, we're going to have the new edition, which already is so much easier to use from everything we've been working on. And getting that feedback from users, it was difficult until we actually launched the app.
Sure, yeah.
Because a lot of my buddies and stuff, I would show it, and everybody's busy, but it wasn't until we launched the app and then started getting critical feedback to just simple stuff of flow of how to navigate through the app, and then see when we ask people and say, well, would you like this? And they say, oh, we'd love that feature.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, did you know the feature's there? And they're like, no. I'm like, yeah, it's right here.
Yeah,
and,
but they couldn't figure out how to get there.
They couldn't figure out how to get to it. So once we kind of figured out that, this is a problem, it's been very rewarding to kind of dive back into the process and try and make that flow much, much better.
Yeah, it's funny about the feedback thing. I feel like you get the best feedback from people who are paying you full price for it. You know what I mean?
In anything, the person that's, I always tell people, tell me if it sucks, tell me it sucks. If this feature sucks, and tell me why.
Yeah.
And then if I say, well, did you know that feature's there? Don't be I need to be upset at us because we didn't make it more prevalent or more widely known that feature is right there within their fingertips.
Yeah.
But anytime you build, it's the first time I've built anything like this that's technology based. We've learned a lot as a company, and it's been a great journey. But I'm really excited to get this new renovation out to people and see how they like it.
Nice. Good deal. Well, I don't want to keep you all day, man. I've got 2 more questions for you that should be easy. I want to know what you view right now in the current hunting landscape as like the most underrated hunt, and then if you got any gear that say you used over the last year that you're positive on.
You know, as far as underrated hunt, we go back. I always say the Coues deer hunt.
Yeah.
I think it's the best spot and stalk hunt and animal and experience for the price.
What do guided Coues hunts cost now?
They range anywhere from, I'd say, $6,500 to $9,500.
Yeah, so in the spectrum of guided hunts, there's reasonable.
Yeah, and the ability to go down and hunt them in the rut is second to none, because you actually get to see them chasing does. You get to see them fighting other bucks, you know, making scrapes, you know, running and chasing. It's when a lot of the big deer come out. You know, you can go all year and not see them, and all of a sudden you see a big deer. I think that is an undervalued hunt, or, you know, kind of under the radar, although it's getting more and more popular.
Yeah. Do you guys have aoudad on those same ranches?
We don't, and that was another animal. I have not hunted aoudad, but I think they are becoming very popular. You've been on a few of those hunts. I think very similar. You don't have to pay the North American sheep prices, but can still get that, you know, same kind of spot and stock, you know, ram experience. Without having hunted them myself, you know, I hear lots of people really like those.
It's super weird. So, I mean, I have a regret about not getting into that business when I had a lease in Texas. I should have just gone whole hog, because they was before they were popular. I mean, you could hunt them you could kill huge ones on ranches for $2,000, 25 free range stuff, you know, and now they've quadrupled in price, but, they're fun to hunt, man, and they're not much different than, they really aren't. Like, the problem is that species, from my perspective, Jay, when you talk about the hunt, it depends, because aoudad are killed in a lot of different ways, and there's totally different far ends of the spectrum. I mean, you can hunt them in stuff where it's pretty much a desert sheep hunt and kind of a hard one, or you can hunt them where they're no different than shooting a wild pig on a feeder or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you have a weird, you know, there's a weird world there that you got to kind of sift through, you know. But they're fun, and they stayed fairly. I mean, relative to the comparison now, they're still inexpensive, but they stayed real inexpensive for a long time.
Yeah,
you know.
Everyone I know that's been aoudad hunting, they just love it.
Yeah.
You know, and especially the ones that are the real kind of open country and spot and stock glassing. You know, I just love glassing, being, you know, here from Arizona, out here in the West where things are open, and, you know, hunting a lot in Mexico, you know, getting to sit down behind a tripod and you know, glassing and picking things apart. It's just what I've done for a long, long time. And you talk about equipment or gear, I have to kind of tell a few stories on myself. Phil Kramer, director of operations, he's kind of dove headfirst into the SIG thing.
Okay.
And you know,
you're talking stabilized stuff.
Yeah, okay. Stabilized. So
yeah.
I mean, he's like sold all his European glass, and he's gone to just, you know, SIG this, SIG that, and I will give him some credit in the gear. As we're talking about gear, we will be on these sheep hunts, and we'll pop out, and I mean, I'll have my backpack. Maybe we'll pop out of a rig, just pop up to a little knob, or even just driving around looking, scouting for rams. And by the time I have my tripod set up, he's already out there just hammering.
Yep.
And, you know, I've kind of been poo-pooing the whole thing, and, you know, I have a pair of the SIGs, and the quality of glass to me, when I'm just so spoiled with everything with Swarovski that, you know, I've for years, that wow factor, it just doesn't quite have
painful,
it.
Huh? Yeah.
But I will say, Kramer's just like, hey, Scott, when are you going to set up your tripod? I've already found 5 rams, like, you know, and I'm over there still getting set up and sitting down, and he's like, you're missing out.
Yeah.
And I really think there's something to this, and the reason I bring this up when it comes to gear, like I use them and I like them and they're cool. I haven't gone head over heels like a lot of people have, and certainly like Phil has. But I will tell you, like when Swarovski just came out with those spotting scopes that have the image stabilized,
Sure.
Technology in them. And I know nothing about this. I've asked Cody, I've grilled him, like I've called my
Right.
Swarovski reps, but like the thing that really excites me about it is the fact that I think Swarovski now is going to enter into the
Sure.
image stabilized game. All of the European brands, if they're not going to get into the image stabilized game, they're going to miss out. So I
Sure.
have to think they're working on it. And then from my perspective with SIG, like thank you for pushing the envelope and
Yeah.
these new. You probably have them. I think it's the Pro model or something.
Yeah, the
I
HD.
mean, they're way better.
Yeah. Yep.
And like from a consumer, like it's the best thing for all of these companies to be competing with each
Sure.
other and pushing the envelope, because I think the second now that we can, just keep pushing that envelope of image stabilized binoculars, image stabilized spotting scopes, it's going to make what we do that much easier. I'm not much into the new idea of like you hold this spotting scope up and now press the button and it's like that's
yeah.
not real practical for what I do.
Yeah,
I don't think.
I don't think it's practical. So,
But I think where everything's
Yeah,
going
yeah.
is exciting to me because I'll
Yep.
be able to get better digiscoping video. I'll be able to see things, especially with image stabilized spotting scopes, rifles, if they go rifle scope avenues, but, binoculars for me, in having high quality glass. And I think SIG's going to continue to get better. So like my hat's off. The SIG guys came down and hunted Coues with the meat eater guys last year in Mexico, and Phil hunted with them and, couldn't say enough good, he just really enjoyed and listening to them talking about what they're working on and stuff. So
what's next?
My hat's off to them big time.
Yeah, it's a really interesting world, and my thought on it, Jay, is that it's all like right now we're all trying to figure out the use cases, including the companies and including myself. I've used them a bunch now, and I've used the SIG stabilized spotter, the original Zulu 6s, the new Zulu 6s you're talking about. Like glass is not all that great. Low light performance kind of is pretty rough, so you can't be using the real high magnification because it just doesn't work very well. But the stabilization is amazing, and I think that right now we're just figuring out when. Like if you're doing a hunt with those binoculars, like you're saying, you get out of the truck and you look and he's finding game before you. Well, a lot of hunts, that is not. That after that you don't sit there in glass for 4 hours. The reality
so for a lot of hunts, that's very practical.
Yeah, exactly. For your hunt, it's like, well, it's awesome that he got ahead of you, but it really doesn't matter.
And that's what I tell Kramer. I'm like, okay, the second that we start hiking up the knobs and I get to the knob, and yes, if you can get there and you can handhold much better than I can, but for a Coues deer application, like really trying to pick deer apart at a long distance in the shade of the hill, like I need the highest, the best resolution and quality glass that I can have, because I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. But for a lot of hunts where you're just bopping around,
I mean,
the use case is through the roof.
Yeah,
like
very hard to argue with them for a lot of those kind of hunts. I mean, basically hunts where you're not glassing for 30, 40 minutes, an hour plus. I mean, that would be my primary binocular.
Absolutely.
Then you get into...
And I think the bigger the animal you're looking for, like for elk, mule deer, two pretty big animals, bears.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some application there for, being able to move quickly. I've just glassed off of a tripod for so long. I'm kind of have my ways, but I still think like an image stabilized binocular, image stabilized spotting scope, like I see the application with a lot of the wind.
Yeah.
And the wind chop and cutting down on that vibration. Like I think having those image stabilized binoculars, spotting scopes on a tripod and being able to get better video, quality, I think it's going to be I mean, I keep saying, and I've been saying, it's a great time to be a consumer because all of these companies seem to keep pushing the envelope with making better products.
No, I totally agree. And I for sure agree in there what you said earlier. It is not going to, the tripod's not going anywhere because you can, even the stabilized spotters, you hold them for 10 minutes like this and you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. Because they're, you're still going to put them on a tripod.
I mean, for me, what is a spotting scope there for? It's there to classify and identify.
Yeah.
And it's great that you can take a standard spotting scope and you can't even get it in the field of view. And it's great that you can handhold and hit the image stabilize and at least kind of see, oh, it's a buck, and I can kind of see. But I think when you do the things and having to make the judgment calls that I have to make on, is it a 112 buck or is it a 108 buck?
Yeah.
And he's, a mile and a half away or something. I need to be able to sit. I need to be still. I need to be able to really pick them apart. It's not just, oh, it's a buck.
No,
I think there's a great use case for that, but not specifically for what I do yet.
Yeah. And I had the SIG stabilized spotter, a season before they were selling it. And I went into it, and it's confusing, Jay, because even Swarovski, they're marketing them right now as get rid of your tripod. And it's not, it doesn't align with so the way that I found, so I went into it having that, went out, tried to glass with it on a backpack hunt without my tripod. I think I said bipod earlier, but tripod. And immediately I thought, oh, I just don't like this thing because it's not working great. And I immediately went back to my Swarovscope on my backpack hunts. And I left that spotter just, collecting dust in my garage. And then I started taking on a couple more hunts, particularly hunts where I could take lots of optics. And I started grabbing it a bunch for a totally different use case in a lot of vehicle-based stuff. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, like there's a buck over there. I don't want to get my tripod out. Just grab that thing out of the center console, throw the stabilization on, boom. Oh, want a video, throw my camera on it, boom, video. Hey, you got this buck on this ranch or whatever.
Right.
It's awesome for that.
Or that's a buck we need to take a look at. I mean, there is something to be said if you're rolling around scouting in a vehicle, in a UTV, whatnot, and you just want to, but I would say, can I pop up and look at it with my binos? So the argument's like, so do you pull out the spotting scope, or you just pop up your binos and go, that's a shooter I need to get, or that's a buck I want to film. Yeah. So I also have been a little bit smiled at the rollout of the application for these, and kind of like, come on, you don't have me yet. You don't have, and the new release with Swarovski, great, I'm sure they're phenomenal, but I need more power. I need more power.
What's the max? 35?
I think it's 35.
And that's what I'm sure there's a technology reason, or it may be that they're keeping the objectives pretty small, so they just don't, but it is interesting, man, because I know exactly what you're getting out there. It's like, well, that use case is, why not just have a big pair of binoculars and you can kind of do the same thing. And there is something to that. But I just found myself using it for that. And the other thing, Jay's, on a stock, where particularly rifle stocks, I like to videotape shots. I've learned over the years that, man, when I'm guiding or if I'm hunting with buddies, if I can videotape the shot, not for use anywhere, just for my own personal use, just see what happened.
Where it hit.
And man, those stabilized spotters, I could be belly crawling and I can literally get a shot with a guy and grab that spotter out of my backpack, turn it on, throw my phone on, and just right there videotape the shot.
Yeah, and the question I would have is have you had the experience where the recoil of the shot, are you steady even when it jumps?
Yeah, they're pretty good. It's pretty good.
And
man.
I mean, I say okay, and even take it a step further and take out the belly crawling, but if you could put it on a tripod,
it'd be better.
It'd be better. But I mean, I'm just excited that SIG is
pushing everybody that.
And I mean, they're going to push Vortex, they're going to push Swarovski, Leica, Zeiss, you name it, every company. Because if you're not in that game, I think you're going to miss out.
It'll be a thing in our future as hunters for sure. All this stuff is
one more thing I wanted to point out, Tricer, Drew, came out with a pretty cool thing for people that really like long-range glassing, and it's the Tricer 360. And it's to describe it, I don't have one here with me, but you can sit down, you have it on your tripod, and there's a little
micro
little
pan,
wheel.
right?
And when I first saw it, I was like, come on, Drew, what is this? And I'm going to tell you, it's incredible because you can just sit there and very smoothly roll that wheel and works on your pans left and right and just smooth. You're not having to use your tripod handle, like you're just barely moving that thing. The other thing that it's a great use case is when you're videoing. So in elk season, I love to take my Swarovski spotting scope and digiscope elk. And it's something I've done for a long time. And that device allows you, when a bull's out there rutting and tracking, one of the challenges off of a tripod is doing it smooth enough where you're not getting it. But that rolling wheel is pretty sweet when they're just kind of working cows. Now, if you're too close, like it's too much movement. Sure. But if they're out there at 300-400 yards, it's great because you can without touching the tripod too much, you can move that wheel and still get really good video.
I had to laugh when you said that because of all of Drew's stuff at Tricer, that's like my favorite.
It's incredible.
It's my favorite thing.
I'd like to see that wheel maybe I've told them get a little bit bigger, just a little, maybe like a quarter.
Oh, like
size.
You mean the actual knob?
Yeah, the actual knob.
Yeah.
I feel like with gloves on and stuff, the little one, it could be a little. I like Drew because he listens. And he can take some criticism.
Yep.
And he knows I'm not going to tell him it's good unless it is good.
Yeah.
Because I just don't believe that kind of feedback has any worth.
Right.
It has no worth.
Yeah, no, that I call it the micro panner.
Yeah.
But he calls it the little term. But no, I think it's as far as I know, he's the only one that does it. Now, do you know, Jay, one thing that I have noticed, it's funny, I add that, so just so everybody understands how it's used, is it can go like in between whatever pan head you're using in the tripod. So it's just a standalone thing. It could be used with Tricer heads, any heads. And then so it goes in between. The one thing that I do notice, it's amazing to me how accustomed I get to my setup. I notice that my head is taller now. So you got to kind of recalibrate.
Yeah, and it's like the pancake effect.
Yeah.
And like I was talking with Drew, and one of the challenges with all tripods is like, I don't really want to get this stacking mentality going because I really like to be as low to the ground as possible. And the more stacking you do get going, the more vibration you're going to get. Sure. It's just inevitable. And so one of my gripes, if you will, is like trying to make that feature, which he has it in the JC legs, which it's built in. It's
in the tripod, correct?
But we still, whenever he asks me about building tripods and what I think about heads, like I still want to get away from getting this big stack going.
Yeah.
Even though you're serving a purpose, that's my biggest fear is like, let's not get too much stackability going, although it makes it nice for someone that's usually using a heavier pair of binoculars and looking long range. Every time we stack something different causes a little more vibration.
Yep. Because now you've got tripod, you've got
plate,
the 360, the plate, you've got the quick release, then you've got the head. Now you're like this. Yep. But it seems nitpicky, but I notice it too. I actually notice it from a movement perspective, but I also notice it from, it's harder for me, Jay, to get to the right height quick if I have a lot on the top. Yep. You know what I mean? And that's probably just because I need to get used to it.
Yeah, because, the standard locking place where your legs are, a lot of times you can't sit, then you have to start extending legs, and then you have to start widening the legs. So the more stack you get, you kind of have to play with, like, where is the sweet spot of the particular legs that you have.
Sure.
To are you sitting in a stool? Are you sitting on flat ground? Are you sitting on your butt? All of those kind of things.
all the stuff
And then
factors
as
in.
well as if you're using straight or angled, the more stack you get, the more problematic it gets if you're looking downhill.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. You're a straight guy, right?
Yeah, we could argue that. That's a whole nother argument. But I just feel like target acquisition with straight is, for what I do, straight is better for target acquisition.
Yeah.
And then from switching from binos to spotting scope. So I'm not a stool sitter. I sit on my rear end on a pad, and I'm typically Coues deer hunting. I'm up high looking down.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm looking down, that's when I like a straight spotting scope so I can look down.
Sure.
Now the angled guys say they can curve it, but I would argue I think target acquisition with straight looking down is way faster with straight. Now, there is a huge argument, and I get it, for being down low and looking up.
Yeah.
I think that has a lot of merit for sure. But
if you're glassing from the bottom of a drainage, you're glassing up
it's
all the
way
time.
easier to use angled.
It's easier to angle. But I agree, and I mean, let's be honest. The reality is that if you've been using one or the other for 10 years,
That's another
you're
thing.
not going to change. But the absolutely target acquisition is better with straight. And the other thing about angled, and I'm an angled guy, but if you glass any from a truck window, straight's better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you run into the same thing because you either have to shift your sitting position.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So I want to be able to look at a buck, Coues buck, and he's like rutting a doe, and he's like about to go over a ridge. I want to be able to switch from my binos to my spotting scope without having to shift my
Your body
in any or move my tripod head. I would argue with angled, almost every time you have to move the head in some direction or move your whole. I want to be able to just go like this, pop it on, go back to my binos, go back to spotting scope, and never move my torso.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're judging those bucks, every second counts. Sometimes it doesn't matter, you have all day, but a lot of times it's like, I got to see this buck before he goes over the ridge. Why? Well, it's going to save me from, number one, stop looking at all this country, stop
Just
glassing.
focus on,
And now I've got to go hike an hour over because I think I saw a good buck. If I were able to get on him quick on the spotting scope and go, no, he's not what I thought, then seconds matter.
Yeah, it could save you 25% of your hunt time, whatever.
Not to mention all this great country here that I'm not going to get to look at because I need to I need to be on foot and move.
Yeah, and there's a whole skill set to that, right? Because the way I think about it, Jay, is the more I have to move, there's a bigger chance I'm going to lose my field. I'm going to lose my field of view, right? Like, of course, my binoculars are going to, it's going to be the different set of field of view. But if I don't have to move my body, I can just immediately catch him again.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, that was great, man. Where can people follow you?
So my Instagram is probably the easiest, J Scott Outdoors on Instagram, and feel free to send me a DM or jscottoutdoors.com too is my website. I don't really keep it up to date, but Instagram is probably the best way to follow me.
Good deal, man. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, it's always great being on with old Stanford here.
If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.